Welcome to the Gathering of Tribes weekly discussion of the Come Follow Me lessons. I'm Chuck Kay, and I'm here with Rachel Krause, and we are glad that you're able to join us. As we discuss the Doctrine and Covenants with faithful members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This week, we have invited Cynthia Connell and Michael Padeken to join us in these discussions.
Cynthia W. Connell is an award-winning creative nonfiction and poetry writer. She has a BA in English from Brigham Young University, and her articles, essays, and poems have appeared in both national and international publications. In addition to her 35 years of writing experience, Cynthia has worked in Native American advocacy and education in her community and local schools. Her church callings have varied between being ward gingerbread house specialist to serving as the Lamanite cultural specialist for historic Temple Square in Salt Lake City. She completed a full-time mission in the Arizona Holbrook Phoenix mission and now serves as her ward stake education specialist. She and her husband Richard enjoy spending time with family members, including their two grandchildren. Cynthia's native ancestry originates among the Saponi peoples of the Piedmont region of Virginia and North Carolina, as well as Algonquin First Nations communities in both Maine and Quebec, Canada. Welcome, Cynthia. I would like for you to take a moment to give us a little bit more introduction of yourself.
Well, I just know everyone's waiting to find out if gingerbread specialist is on the official handbook. And the answer is no. But what happened was I was newly baptized, and every year our university ward raised funds to be able to go to the nearest temple, which was Salt Lake City. And we were living in Washington State. And so it was really important to be able to raise those funds. And every year at Christmas time, they had a bazaar, and our ward's job was to make gingerbread houses. So that was my first calling in the church.
That's awesome. The big burning question is, were you set apart?
I believe I was.
Probably were. That's great. Awesome. Well, Michael, he is a native Hawaiian from, I think it's Hau'aulu.
Hau'ula.
Hau'ula?
Yeah,
Okay.
Hau'ula.
Hawaii has degrees in social work, Indian studies, curriculum instruction design, mostly, I guess, from BYU, and secondary teaching license in social studies, special education, ESL, middle school math, and a whole bunch of other things. It looks like he's been doing this for, it says 34 years, or maybe it's 35 or 36 by now, I don't know. But special education, and I think that's awesome. And that presently he is in a teaching partnership, minority-owned education consulting company. And they do basic math skills, finger popping math facts. I like that. And dedicated to the service and welfare of our indigenous communities. He served in the church in various callings: Sunday school course 12 teacher, bishop of the Lamanite ward in Provo, Utah, first counselor in the bishopric, Sunday school president, scoutmaster, Indian seminary director in the northern Great Plains area, seminary principal, release time seminary teacher. I'm one of those seminary principals right now. So, and he says his greatest accomplishment is his family, of course, 6 children and 23 grandchildren. Got me beat. And they are the joy and happiness of his life. And so welcome, Michael. Do you have any other additional things you want to add to that or update?
Pretty much, I hope to present at the National Indian Education Conference coming up in Cocaine in October.
Mm-hmm.
And the presentation will share with the participants is a workable plan for increasing basic math skills. And I've been working with the Paiute tribe on the Walker River Indian Reservation in a little public school called Shures, Nevada. with my good friend Lance West, who's the principal. And for the past, since 2022, we've been working together, increasing the basic math skill achievement scores for those kids, because COVID did a number on us. It kind of destroyed a lot of the continuity of kids learning, academic learning, because of COVID. And so what we're trying to do is build up those skills back up to where they need to be because of the ending. During the COVID, people were not going to schools, but they were trying to do it online, and it kind of just wrecked everything. Anyway, so I'm going to present that workable plan that we've developed over the years till now. I'm still doing it. And if you're in Spokane for the Indian Education Conference, come and look at our presentation, Lance and I.
Very good. Thank you. So we got together today and we were discussing the Doctrine and Covenants sections 30 through 36. A lot about missionary work, a lot about callings for missions, a lot about the instruction to those that were called to be missionaries. And so, but for us, one of the focal points of this is the fact that this was the beginning of the church missionary effort. And because everybody had, knew about the Book of Mormon and how it was written to the Lamanite people, the desire that they know about this. And so many people were desirous to find out when this work would start. And so I'm just going to start this by reading this beginning part of the lesson right from the manual. And it says, Parley P. Pratt had been a member of the church for about a month when he was called into the wilderness to preach the gospel. Thomas B. Marsh had been a member for even less time than that when he was told, "The hour of your mission has come." Orson Pratt, Edward Partridge, and many others had likewise barely been baptized when their mission calls came. Perhaps there's a lesson in the I'm sorry, I have to move this up. Perhaps there's a lesson in this pattern for us today. If you know enough to accept the restored gospel by baptism, you know enough to share it with others. Of course, we always want to increase our gospel knowledge, but God has never hesitated to call upon the unlearned to preach his gospel. He invites all of us to open our mouths and declare my gospel. And we do that best not through our own wisdom and experience, but by the power of the Spirit. And so with that in mind, we will go ahead and talk about this effort here with this barely fledgling church who just barely got organized and set down their own rules. And now some of these brethren, literally, as they say, were baptized one week and were called to missions through Revelation the next week. And so very interesting thing. So let's hear your ideas and thoughts on this.
Well,
Go ahead.
there are a couple of different ways that we can look at it. You can look at it from a historical perspective. A lot of biographies have been written about these first missionaries. But I know as I prepared, I felt strongly that I should look at the scriptures themselves and focus in on what the Doctrine and Covenants tells us about what happened. So that, for me, that was how I approached it.
Okay. Anybody else?
For me, I was interested in how the church fared on how the missionaries fared on their first mission. So I don't know if Cynthia did anything, or you and Rachel did anything on this, but I did some research on the tribes that were touched by the missionaries coming across to go to the Indian frontier, and what tribes they were able to stop by and share some of the gospel. Most most were not successful, but there is one group, the Delawares, that they felt like they began to be successful with. And so I kind of researched a little bit about that, but I also compared it to the Book of Mormon missionaries that went to the Lamanites. I don't know if any of you made that connection,
Oh
but
yeah.
the sons of Mosiah and Alma the Younger. I mean, almost the same. It's like a parallel.
Yeah,
universe.
about the same amount of success, wasn't it?
Right.
They got stoned and run out of almost everywhere, and you know, except for the sons of Mosiah and Ammon, you know, they baptized a whole bunch, but that was pretty much the main thrust of that mission, or main success of that mission, I guess, you know.
I think that there's a lot in this. What you're saying, Chuck, is exactly right. There was very little success, but I want to start with a story and then maybe tie this together. A few weeks ago, we had a flood from our kitchen, and it didn't do a lot of damage, but in the process, it took out our living room floor, it took out our kitchen floor, it took out two bedroom floors. And we had worked with a contractor, and we agreed that because our grandchildren are with us quite often while my daughter-in-law is in school, we wanted to keep the house safe. And they would remove the carpet downstairs where their bedrooms were last. Well, guess what? The very first day that the workmen came in, they were taking out the living room floor, and they came downstairs and ripped out all the carpet in the basement where our grandkids were, exposing all of the tack strips. And suddenly it became hugely hazardous. And it resulted in our son and daughter-in-law and the grandchildren having to go and live at another person's house for the last 2 weeks. And the reason I'm telling that story is because we had a plan, but it was attacked out of order. And the success has been really difficult to overcome. Everything in our lives became chaotic because it was done out of order. And when I looked at the history of this mission to the Lamanites, one of the things I saw was that the Lord was establishing an order. And everybody was super, super excited about going and establishing Zion. And they knew that the Lamanites were part of that. They were really excited about that. But the result wasn't what they expected. And as we look at the scriptures, we're going to find out it was because it was done out of order. So, you know, go on with what you're saying, but hopefully as we talk about it, we'll be able to see what had to be learned in order for that to have been a successful mission.
Many of the things that were learned by the saints after the church was initially organized was, like you said, they wanted to go to the highest level as quickly as possible. Remember how they wanted to establish the United Order several times? And it just didn't happen because the people were not ready. And I kind of equate this to what you're talking about here. Our Native American brothers and sisters back at that time, probably most of them were not ready. I mean, talking about what happened to the people, the Trail of Tears, that's what this happened at this particular time. The Indian Removal Act, all of these things were happening, and it caused a great deal of disruption, like you said, chaos among the people. So how would you feel if your government the government at the time was pushing you out of your homeland, and some more white people come to you to talk to you about God and all of this good stuff? And what's happened to us? You know, they feel really bad about what's happening to them. How receptive were they towards the missionaries? initially. So kind of the same kind of thing. But other things happened during this missionary effort of the first missionaries to the Lamanites. And, you know, many people that they preached to joined the church and became great leaders along the way. But many of them were not Native Americans. They were all people that became great leaders in the church. Kind of like the test of when they had the soldiers, I forget the soldiers, when they went to do battle, and all of the what was the name of that? I can't remember.
In the Book of Mormon or in this new history?
No, in church history, when they Joseph Smith called a whole bunch of men to
The
go and
Mormon battalion.
the Mormon battalion,
Zion,
yeah,
Oh, Zion's
And,
camp.
Zion's camp.
Yeah.
Okay.
Zion's camp and all that. It was mainly to find out who were the best leaders, wasn't
Right.
it?
Right.
So
That's what it ended up being. Yeah.
yes, So same kind of thing here, I think. As they were coming across, they weren't successful with our Lamanite brothers and sisters at that time, probably because of how they felt about being removed from their homeland. So they weren't receptive for the most part. And then along the way, they converted many of the great leaders of the church back at that time.
You know, it seems like an accident, but if you look at the Doctrine and Covenants, it wasn't. There were actually 2 mission calls given to Oliver Cowdery, and we missed the first one. The first one occurred in DNC 1837, and it says, "And now behold, I give unto you Oliver Cowdery, and also unto David Whitmer, that ye shall search out the 12 who shall have the desires of which I have spoken." So the very first call was to seek out the 12 apostles. And guess what happened? They went out, and boy, there's an awful lot here. But they went out and they thought, we'll visit our friends who live in Kirtland, Ohio, and we'll just share the message of the gospel with them. But who they brought into the church were names like Sidney Rigdon, Isaac Morley, Levi Hancock, Lyman White, John Murdoch, Philo Dibble, Edward Partridge. These are names that we're all going to be hearing about as we get farther and farther in. In fact, we're only 2 sections in the Doctrine and Covenants in before we actually find out about Sidney Rigdon. So these were the first fruits. So, you know, we talk about the field is white, all ready to harvest, and we all say that as missionaries, but I don't think we think very much about it. I think we assume it's just a wheat field and everybody's ready to go. And no, I believe, and this is me speaking, that there was a tremendously symbolic thing happening, and that was bringing in the very, very first elect into the church. And if you look at ancient Israel, they had a whole process, a whole symbolism system built on this first fruits and bringing in the very first group from the harvest. And they were sanctified and special. So when you get down to Kirtland, guess what? That's where they're going to wind up building a temple. And that parallels beautifully with the idea of the first fruits from the Old Testament and the New Testament. And so they went down there and they taught them, and they were ready, absolutely ready. And they joined the church, and by section, was it 35 in this? They were already with Joseph Smith. And so was Edward Partridge in section 36, these very first converts. So in that capacity, they were doing exactly what the Lord wanted, and bringing these people who the Lord had prepared. These are people who would be in the temple in Kirtland. They would be there for that dedication, and they had so much to offer. They were imperfect, and that was going to show up later, but they had a lot to offer. And so in that way, they were very successful. But then they went on, as Bishop Padeken said, and they thought, well, we'll have the same amount of success when we get down with the Native Americans. I think a lot of missionaries do that. Wow, I'm a great missionary. I'm doing a great job. And in this area, I had success. And so the next area, I'm going to have success, and then they have nothing.
Yeah.
And as we talk a little bit more about missionary service, I think the vision comes in that we have missions based on not our own selves, but on the people that we're serving. And as Bishop Padeken said, the Native Americans had gone through this trauma. They were not ready in many ways to accept the gospel. There were people interfering with their ability to hear the gospel, but there's more. And that's the thing we miss.
Yeah, I think we have to be careful how we define success sometimes, especially in a situation like this, because I think that, a person can go into a mission thinking that success is baptisms. How many baptisms do I have? That's my definition of success. The higher amount of baptisms I have, the more successful I was. But sometimes that's not what Heavenly Father placed us there for. Sometimes that's not the point. Sometimes, and we may think that's the point, but I think a lot was learned um by those by the men, Oliver Cowdery, who went on these missions. I think they learned a lot, and I think maybe at this particular time that was part of the point for them. Is Heavenly Father knew they weren't really prepared or capable of baptizing en masse these people. They weren't ready for it. And so for them, I think maybe Heavenly Father saw it as successful that they learned, that they understood that maybe they made, did some things in a certain way and they could do better. Sometimes that's the success, is just learning to do better the next time. And so I think, we have to just, maybe sometimes we have to redefine what we think success is and look at it through the eyes of our Heavenly Father and our Savior, and what would they define as success. So, but I look at this too, and I think, wow, these small, the people that they did get to talk to, and the people that were receptive, how cool is that? How amazing would that be to be one of the first, modern day Lamanites, if you will, that got to hear about your book again, about the book of the people that lived here on this continent. How amazing would that be? And so um it may have been small, and I kind of just see it as this thing that happened in almost like a small little unknown place, but I think it was huge, and I think it was important, and it was the beginning of something that was going to grow into something much, much, much bigger.
Yeah.
I think you're exactly right, Rachel. And there are two scriptures that back you up exactly. Remember, I told the story about things being done out of order. Most of us have no idea, if we just don't think about it, that D&C 1 was received after those first missionaries returned. And there were actually responses. I'm sure that the prophet was going, why didn't they, have the success? And in D&C 1:24, it says, behold, I am God and have spoken it. These commandments are of me and were given unto my servants in their weakness, after the manner of their language, that they might come to understanding. So the Lord suddenly is talking about language, and that the preaching of the gospel needs to be in the language and in the understanding of the people that they're teaching, which was a completely foreign idea at the time. Other missionaries from other churches were going out colonizing all over the world, and they were expecting that the people that they taught should learn English customs, and learn about Jesus Christ in this second language. And here's the Lord in D&C 1 telling us, no, language is important, culture is important. And later on in D&C 90, he says, verse 11, for it shall come to pass in that day that every man shall hear the fullness of the gospel in his own tongue and in his own language, through those who are ordained unto this power by the administration of the Comforter, shed forth upon them for the revelation of Jesus Christ. So there's two witnesses right there. The very first one in D&C 1, and then later in D&C 90, that say, we will teach the gospel in the language and in the culture that the people understand. And that was the pattern that was established. And it's still the pattern we're using today. And there were people I know, like in New Zealand, the Maori, that they knew that the truth would come when people spoke their language, not forcing a new language and culture upon them. So if that was just the one thing that they learned from this section of their mission, wow, what an impact. To me, that's success. They learned what they didn't know.
Well,
You
look
know,
at what's happening now throughout the world. We're sending these young, inexperienced elders and sisters to go out and teach old people, adults, and they're doing it after having started to learn the language of the people. And we have been very successful in that pattern, like you just did, Cynthia. Fantastic things are happening and still happening as we go out and continue doing the same kind of thing of teaching the people in their own language. Powerful, powerful.
Yeah, and I think as with any effort to grow the church, promote the church, bring people into the church, Satan is going to jump in the way of that. He's going to make it as difficult as possible. You know, that winter, as they came on and started to do this, was known as the winter of deep snow.
Oh yeah.
And so they were hindered in that area. And but I did understand from reading that those Shawnee and Delaware that they did teach, they did use interpreters. So they had people there that knew the language, was able to teach them. That's why the Delaware were pretty accepting, and asked them, you know, because winter was coming on, and said, well, can you come back next spring? And at that point, they never did get back around to doing any of that. And I think that there was a couple other things that were working against them. Number one is that Indian Removal Act. That there were agents that came and said, you guys can't do this. You can't go out to the Native Americans and teach to them. I don't know if they were thinking that somehow the members were going to help them, which in a lot of cases that was a concern by the general public, was that they were going to try and get the Indians on the church's side and use them to further the church. And then the other idea was to also not to basically colonize them, but not to abuse them and to take advantage of their lack of understanding of how, you know, money and all these other things that were part of the world that at that time, you know, abused them in that. They did anyway. And I think there were still also a lot of church members who still held all those Anglican themes and thoughts and feelings about other people. And so, you know, there was going to be a challenge. But I do believe that this was a plan, and this was not to 100% penetrate and involve those that were out west, but it was more of a time to build the church. I mean, when you think about it, there's only been a few months that the church is operating. Essentially, it's the Whitmers and the Smiths and a couple other families that are all basically the church. And so they needed new members. And so with them being able to go to Independence and find City Rignan and all these other folks along the way, this was the building of the core structure of the church. And so I think, we can call it whatever we want to call it, mission to the Lamanites, but maybe that's just to um, pacify us. They had a zeal to do that. And hey, I'm going to use this zeal to have them go and be willing to do this. But I would really like you to pluck out those choice people who have the strength and understanding, and especially the faith to build this church and to follow the prophet. And so I don't think there was any waste here. It's just like, natives, when you butcher a sheep, you use every little piece of it, And so this was a mission that was like that.
Yeah.
You send out there,
Yeah.
you went after your sheep, but you didn't leave anything behind. And so I think that although in a lot of church literature it says these were successful, I don't think they're successful in the way that, from our point of view, that would be success, because if they're going to come and teach the Lamanites, we didn't get that done. That didn't happen. But there were other amazing things that happened, and the instruction to these missionaries is just exceptionally valuable to missionaries today. Number one, that's always the uh, ancillary benefit of these kinds of activities, is that, like you said, we go out and we learn, Rachel, that this is sort of a test run for some of these things, and see how it all works and see if we can accept it. And especially for people who are just baptized within a month, made, given the calling of elder, and set apart for some things to do, and they barely know any of the doctrine, the tenets of the church. And so from that point of view, I think it was a great benefit, and I can see why these sections are there to help us understand, that sometimes we're going to be called into the wilderness, and that can be anywhere. Wilderness to me is just someplace you don't know. That could be in the middle of the city, and you're from the reservation, and you go out there, you're in a wilderness. So all these things, I think, bring us truth and understanding. And so let's go on from there. These sections are so full of other things. So Cynthia, you were going to tell us something about some of the other additional things about your understanding of these verses here.
There are so many messages that are positive and reinforcing in the Doctrine and Covenants in the early chapters that can apply to this. And Doctrine and Covenants Section 3, verses 1 through 3, it specifically, verse 3 says, remember, it is not the work of God that is frustrated, but the work of men. And over in the scriptures, he's telling us that in section 10, verses 46 through 47, I think this is really important. He said, promises given to the Lamanites are going to be fulfilled because Christ promised that he would fulfill the righteous prayers of their ancestors as recorded in the Book of Mormon. So in section 40 or verse 46, it says, and behold, all the remainder of this work does contain all those parts of my gospel, which are my holy prophets, yea, and also my disciples desired in their prayers should come forth unto this people. Wow. It doesn't matter where we are in that time frame, whether we're in the beginning or the end, we are linked to the faith of our ancestors, that God, he promises that I will be the same. In this section in that we're studying, he promises, I am the same yesterday, today, and forever. And so it doesn't matter when we learn the gospel, it's the fulfillment of the prayers and faith of our ancestors. We are being blessed by them. And to me, that's like, wow, God had a plan for me that goes thousands of years back.
Yeah.
To me, that's such a powerful message that we all need to hear and we all need to accept.
Yeah, when you think about the intricacy of his plan and all the detail and everything that's part of it, from as we learn about this effort, everything from man's laws to seasonal weather to language barriers to the having to travel on foot to do all this. All of those things played a part in this, and it's but it was understood that this would move along at this pace, and that we would get it eventually. But you know, this is, I think, one of our biggest problems. We think in our timing, and God's thinking in His timing. You know, our schedules aren't set the same. Our clocks are running at different speeds, and so sometimes we think that it's not going to happen. But maybe it's not going to happen in my lifetime, but it will happen sooner or later.
When I told that story about things being in the wrong order, this is where it applies, because they wanted to establish Zion, like was said earlier. They were really excited about that. They wanted to save the American Indians. They thought they were doomed, and they were, you know, they had good intentions. But just like those first 127 converts have been prepared to be the first converts, well, the Lamanites have a time attached to the establishment of Zion, that slowly the amount of Lamanites would build who joined the church, but eventually it's going to be a flood. And that is a sign of the establishment of Zion. And so here these faithful early saints wanted to establish Zion, but they didn't realize that the Native Americans had to come first, and that they couldn't establish Zion successfully without that being in the proper order. And you know, again, going back to this idea of the ancient Jewish traditions of the first fruits, if you look at all the festivals and everything, it points to the fact that the Lord has end time prophecies too, not just beginning time. And that the link with the Lamanite people is very closely tied to end times. So just because they want to set up Zion in you know, the 1830s, it wasn't the Lord's plan. And they weren't successful, but it will be the Lord's plan. And we're seeing that now. We're seeing people from all over the world joining the church, but more will come. More miraculous things will come, but it must be done in the proper order.
I agree with that, and I think that there's still some really great things to come, and I'm excited to see how things unfold. I wanted to ask both of you, Michael and Cynthia. I would like to hear what your thoughts were about serving your missions, because you both served in areas that had, you know, Lamanite populations, and people who may have had, you know, different languages and different cultural backgrounds. And I would love to hear how what your experience was, serving as a missionary, in the same way that maybe, you know, Oliver Cowdery had to be a missionary. What was it like for you as a missionary?
Who do you want to go first?
Michael, we'll have you go first.
Okay, all right. Uh, it was a powerful experience that I went through. And the thing I remember most, besides loving and working with the people, was my mission president, President Harvey Dahl. He stood up in one of our zone conferences where all the missionaries gathered together, and we all met, had a good time. And then, of course, he needed to talk to everybody in a large session. And then the statement that rings true to me as long as I have lived, that really turned my life in the direction that I needed to go, was, elders and sisters, when you're called to a Lamanite mission, you're called for life. When he said that, I said, by gum, that's what I'm going to do. And I was out there working with the Sioux on the Fort Peck Indian Reservation in a little town called Poplar, Montana.
I've been
And
there.
you've been to Poplar?
Yeah, I served in
Gerald Red Out.
Montana, Wyoming mission. So
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Gerald Red Out. He was the branch president, and his wife was the most saintly Latter-day Saint that I know of, Lenora. She was such a wonderful person. And and I have been honored to be adopted by them, the Indian way. I really appreciated that because I think they kind of like what I did on the while I was there. I was there for 10 and a half months. That's a
Wow.
long time.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and that was another thing President Dahl said. We're sending you out and we're leaving you there. We're not letting you go and baptize who wants to be baptized and leave, you know, and hope that those that you baptize will run the church. No, we're having you staying in your areas, and we want you to fellowship those members and the people that were there and teach them. And we had tremendous success back in the day. This is between, I was out there between 1968 and 70. And it was called the Northern Indian Mission. It had been switched over from the Southwest Indian Mission, which combined both of the missions in the Northern Plains and in the Southwest. But then they split it, and President Dahl was, well, actually before him, President Farmer, I believe it was over both missions. And then they split it, and then later on, President Dahl came in. But we were very successful. And I enjoyed the opportunity to be with the people, experience their conversions, and many of them did. And but I feel badly now that I go back to the reservation from time to time and look at what happened to the people and what's going on there. There is not as many as there used to be when we were out there that are still active in church. The old folks, the old people that were converted a long time ago, yeah, they're pretty well active, but many of the younger ones are not, and that's a disappointment. But you know, the Lord says there will come the Lamanites will be born in the day, and it's going to happen. Deep down inside of all of these less active Lamanite Latter-day Saints, they know the church is true. So when they get that feeling back and the power of the Spirit is on the reservation again among the people, I'm sure, like Cynthia said, it will flood. The people will flood back into the church, and the nations will be born in a day. And it's happening, you know, from places here across the Americas among the Lamanite blood. And we need to continue that. And I'm so happy to be part of that, continuing the process of building the kingdom among our Lamanite brothers. It's pretty big here among the Polynesians. We have, our tribes are very into it, so to speak. And down South America, you know, it's huge down there. Our natives in the Americas, North America, I think need a little bit more time. And, you know, I don't know when it's going to happen, but I think as time goes on, and we who have chosen to live the commandments, because there's so many distractions now, people are being deceived in the church, and they're going their separate ways. And what's really bad is they're sharing it on mass media like this, you know, social media, and they're talking kind of bad about what the church is, the things that are happening in the church. And that's a no-no. I'm sorry, but that's not good. So my experience is one of great gratitude that I am in the process of continuing to build the kingdom among our people. And I really appreciate President Dahl and his statement, because that was what that changed my course in life. And I have served our Lamanite brothers and sisters ever since. Still am.
Thank
That's
you for
great.
sharing that. Cynthia?
I know that you think hard about how you combine people to speak for these lessons. I know you put in a lot of effort. And I can personally testify that what Bishop Padeken said is the truth, that you are called to a Lamanite mission, not just for 18 months or 2 years. You are called for life. I grew up in an urban family from New York, and my father didn't have any cultural traditions other than knowing who he was. And I joined the church, and I like to say I knew how to make meatballs better than I knew how to make fry bread, And I got called to this mission, and I was really, really hesitant. And but I went. And after my mission, I went to BYU, and I was there for a few weeks. And I thought, oh, I'll just go back to being, the way I was before, with other people, who are from the dominant culture. And I got a phone call, and it was from Bishop Sanchez, Zeke Sanchez, that many people know.
Yes, we know.
And he said, I want to meet with you. And he sat me down in front of him, and there was this desk in between us, and I looked into his eyes, and I had this powerful feeling that I was looking into eyes like the Savior's. And he looked at me and he said, you've come home for your mission. Now, what are you going to do for your Lamanite people? And I thought, well, I've done that. But he was right. I chose at that moment to know that I was called for life. On my mission was a lot like the second part of the mission to the Lamanites. It was full of what most people would call failure. I was moved constantly. I didn't understand what I was doing wrong. I blamed myself. There were all sorts of reasons, but I was moved every few weeks. And after people got used to the idea that I was always going to be moved, I got a nickname, and that was that I was an opener. I had the skills that the Lord needed to go in and heal wounds, to be able to testify and be an example of what the Lord could do with education among Lamanite people. And boy, there were a lot of stereotypes that people had. And I went from place to place, and it seemed endless. 18 months of every 6 weeks going to a new place. And at the end of my mission, I thought I was a failure. But when my mission was over, and I went and I talked to Bishop Sanchez, I realized my mission wasn't over. And when I got called to work on Temple Square as a missionary, that was what the Lord needed. He needed someone who could meet people and make them feel comfortable very quickly, who could not be thrown off by meeting an endless array of people constantly from all over the world. And so that opener skill that I suffered through learning on my mission was exactly what the Lord needed when I worked on Temple Square. So we can all go on our missions, and we have expectations that, oh, this is what a good mission looks like. But a mission is designed for the missionary. And they just happen to be the ones sharing the gospel with someone else. But it's always going to be about the missionary. And whether we have a perfect mission in somebody else's eyes, or it's a mission that is grueling, and we never baptize a single person, we come back with greater faith in the Lord, or we choose not to. I chose to have faith and I chose to go forward and just dive in. And I've lived my entire life serving the Native American people, and I have no regrets.
That's beautiful. Thank you. How about you, Rachel?
Well, I haven't served a church mission. It was something that I always thought I wanted to do. I thought a lot about it, and when the time came, it wasn't the right time for me to serve a mission, and so I didn't serve a mission, but I do feel called still to serve our people. And I feel it to my very core that this is what I'm supposed to do. I am supposed to serve our indigenous people. This is what I'm meant to do, and it's probably one of the greatest callings I will have. And I feel as Cynthia and Michael do that this is a lifetime calling for me, that this is something I will always feel called to do. It may happen in different capacities at different times in my life, but it will always be something that is really important to me and something that I will always have focus on. So I feel really blessed to to be able to do that. This feels like an important calling to me. I have always been very drawn to my Hopi ancestry. Um, it's something I've always just been so proud of who I am as Hopi. And so I've always felt called. I think even as a little kid, I've just always been drawn to our people. And so I think the Lord knows that, and he knows me, and he wants to have me use that to serve his people and to serve my people. And so I'm really grateful that I get to do that.
Yeah, that's great. I think that that is part of our nature in being uh, native peoples, and we have a great love for our people and desire to help them. When you go to a great restaurant and you want to come back and tell all your friends about it, oh, this is the best place in the world. You have to go there. You have to try this. And I think once we get that feeling of the gospel, we're the same way. We want to go tell all of our friends, hey, this is a great thing. You really need to try this and be and learn about this because it will benefit you. You will enjoy it, And these sections of the Doctrine and Covenants, when they talk about these missionaries and some of the challenges, I like how they're all essentially calls to serve missions, revelations for them, but they're also different in what they're saying. And some of the facets of this, I was very it kind of opened my eyes to things. One of the things that was said here, this is to Peter Whitmer Sr., and talking about his companion Oliver Cowdery, he says, and be you afflicted in all his afflictions, ever lifting up your heart unto me in prayer and faith for his and your deliverance. So in that, that's one of the things I think I learned on my mission, that unless you and your companion are connected spiritually, then you are not going to be successful. You're not going to have that spirit with you. You need to be connected in some way. And I'm impressed again that all of these sections have something to do with individual needs for these missionaries to go out and serve. And um, and I think this is, like Rachel was saying, this is the blessing, whether you serve a full-time mission or not, whether you're the second assistant to the second counselor in the primary, whatever your calling is, that you are part of this great plan to gather his people back together. And Cynthia, I like you when you mentioned that you went out there and you wondered what you were doing there. Many times I kind of wondered that myself. The people were kind, and they were generous, and they were welcoming, and we shared our messages. But I think I baptized 2 or 3 people the whole time I was there. I wasn't really sure about one because I knew there was some issues, but the benefit has come to me that I think that my immersion in the spirit and service of the Lord changed the direction of my life. And my family was not real super active in the church, and so this was kind of a thing that I had to end up going and kind of doing on my own. And the Lord found a way for me to do all of this. And but I feel like what we're doing right here this evening, maybe one of the reasons I did all the things that I did is we have this new technology and a way to spread the gospel and get this message across, and especially for our peoples, indigenous peoples, native peoples, that maybe they don't feel connected to this, and especially Doctrine and Covenants to me seems a little bit foreign because it's not really a lot about native peoples. They have these things in here, and like you were saying, Cynthia, you almost have to really dig it out and sift it out and refine it in order to get something out of it for ourselves. But I can see that all the tenets that are in here for our benefit and our good are things that native peoples do already. We were talking about the armor of God, and I've said in previous podcasts, I said, us as natives, we've always done things like that. We've marked ourselves. We put things on ourselves as protections for us, for strength, and for uh, endurance and vision and hear. We did these markings and things. We marked our horses. We marked, that was our armor of God. We believed in a God, and so we are asking Him. These are the things that we can do to give ourselves that advantage in this uh, challenges that we have. And so I love that it's all connected, but we do have to sort of dig for it, don't we?
You know, you're talking about how each of these essentially setting apart for missions was different. And I have an example that stood out to me personally. Section 34 is for Orson Pratt. And in it, the Lord refers to a quote from John the Beloved. Now, as a writer, John the Beloved is the premier writer of the scriptures. And nowhere previously has he been quoting John the Beloved, but he did for Orson Pratt, or Parley P. Pratt, I think. Oh, it's a Pratt. What?
Yeah,
But
one
the
of them.
point is,
There was a bunch of them.
there are a bunch of them. The two of them had one thing in common. They wrote poetry. And they wrote poetry about Native Americans. They wrote poetry about Zion. So the Lord was probably talking to them in a language that they were uniquely prepared to understand, and that would go on and probably reinforce what gifts and talents they had. And I was really shocked to find that there were published. You can go on Amazon and find some of these published poems that they wrote, and I had no idea there were poems, long narrative poems about their feelings about the Lamanites and what would happen and fulfilling of prophecies. And I think that would be really exciting for me to look into later on. But 34, 35, and 36 are all very individual. And that's how the Lord will deal with us.
I do like, Chuck, I do like the last section of the Come Follow Me, which talks about following Christ and keeping the faith. Let me just read. Is it okay if I read the last part?
Sure.
This is Doctrine and Covenants Section 33, 12 through 18. which I believe is the foundation of all of our testimonies. If we don't do this, then we're not going to get to that heavenly home we need to be in. Verse 12, behold, verily, verily, I say unto you, this is my gospel. And remember that they shall have faith in me, or they can in no wise be saved. And upon this rock I will build my church. Yea, upon this rock ye are built. And if you continue, the gates of hell shall not prevail against you. And ye shall remember the church articles and the covenants to keep them. And whoso having faith, you shall confirm in my church by the laying on of hands, and will bestow the gift of the Holy Ghost upon you. And the Book of Mormon and the Holy Scriptures are given of me for your instruction and power, and the power of my Spirit quickeneth all things. Wherefore be faithful, praying always, having your lamps trimmed and burning, and the oil with you, that ye may be ready at the coming of the bridegroom. For behold, verily, verily, I say unto you, that I will come quickly. Even so, amen. Powerful words for us to stay faithful, help others to be faithful, those that are struggling, because there's so many of them nowadays, and many of our people are having issues that way too. But I look forward to the day of the anti-Nephi-Lehites, when our people are so righteous that nothing can destroy them. And it's coming. It's the Book of Mormon cycle. It's happening. And we're in that the midnight hours here before the great coming of the Lord. That's what I believe.
Very good.
I just wanted to add something similar. In preparing for this, and I thank you for the opportunity, I realized that the Lamanites often know the teachings of President Spencer W. Kimball, but I didn't realize that some of the most powerful things said about the establishment of Zion also came from Spencer W. Kimball. And I would encourage anyone to go and read what he said. And I remember decades ago reading a book that the church published, and there was a quote in it, and it struck me, and I've never forgotten it. And that was, the people will be living as if they were in Zion when the call comes to live in Zion. So it will be easy for them to do it. And what he meant was that our hearts will be so turned to him, so turned to compassion for our brothers and sisters, that we have no desire to be anywhere else but in Zion. It will be an easy transition. And I think we have to be always on the watch that even in our day, we can get things in the wrong order. We can be enthusiastic about Zion and miss all the signs that have to be fulfilled before. And we need to be informing ourselves on what the prophets are saying. Gather. Don't gather in hate. Don't gather and take sides. Gather and embrace. That's what our living prophet is telling us to do. Embrace our differences. Embrace the differences in languages and cultures. Not fight against them. Embrace our uniqueness that God loves so much. When we have a heart like that, Zion will just bloom forth from us. It won't be a forced thing.
Thank you. Those are really good thoughts. And I think this was just a really, really wonderful discussion. And I'm so grateful for both of you, Cynthia and Michael, for joining us today. It's time for our final question. And Cynthia, I'm going to ask you to go first, and then Michael, you can bring it home at the end. But the question is, why are you thankful for the restoration of the gospel of Jesus Christ?
I have had some time to think about this, and the answer that I give it's a hard answer. I would not be alive without the gospel of Jesus Christ. I grew up in difficult circumstances. Uh, I walked away with post-traumatic stress and a few things like that. And I was working with a counselor at one point, and that's what she said to me. If it weren't for your faith in the gospel of Jesus Christ, you would not have made it. And I know for me, I received a testimony of the Book of Mormon as a child in elementary school. I didn't know what it was. I just saw it and knew that that was how you got peace in your family. That's what the Spirit testified to me. And all those years that I was going through challenges, that was the thing I held on to. That peace comes through the Book of Mormon, and the Book of Mormon comes with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And for me, I was never going to separate from that. So I've been able to raise my family in a different way. I've been able to bring peace in my home. I've been able to avoid some of the choices that other people in my life made that brought difficulties into my life. But all of those are because of my faith in the gospel of Jesus Christ and in the truthfulness of the message of the Book of Mormon.
For me, my life, my journey has been one of continued preparation from the very beginning for something to come next. My testimony really started growing. I mean, I had one only because of my mom, because she was my example. And she, took us to church. My dad was not a member of the church. She took us to church, and I learned a lot in church and everything. And, you get your teen years and you start to kind of go a little crazy. And I was fortunate I never did really serious disobedience of commandments, but I know I wasn't quite up to par of where I needed to be because of my experience growing up. And so because of that experience of my mom helping me out through my developing years, I was able to stay on the path without going way off path, like a lot of my friends and people that I know of have. And so I did not have real major problems, but it prepared me for the next step. As soon as I graduated from high school, my bishop called me and says, "Mike, I'm giving you a job, a calling." So I became the course 12 teacher for my ward. And here I am, just a graduate from high school, and I'm teaching a class of these 12-year-olds. Full circle. Guess what I'm teaching now? I'm teaching the 12-year-olds in Sunday school right now. Love it. I just love my job. Anyway, so then Bishop calls me in. "You want to go on a mission?" "Yeah, Bishop, I want to go, but I don't have a lot of money." And it's, "Don't worry about that. Just ask the Lord if you need to go now." And sure enough, my experience was one that I will never forget, on the Lord saying, "You need to go now." So off I went to the Northern Indian Mission in the Northern Plains. Wonderful experience, my 2 years out there. Had a great time and loved the people and changed my life, basically. I was going to be an electrical engineer. That's what I was interested in, learning. But after my mission, I need to be a people person. And so I went after my mission, came home, went to school, got a degree in social work because you work with people, right? And then later on, I found out I had some skills in teaching, So I became a teacher, a social studies teacher, and that prepared me for becoming a seminary teacher on the Indian reservation as a seminary director. I was up in the Northern Plains for 4 years, and so that was a wonderful experience. And then after my experience working in the seminary, my bishop called me in because I came back to the Lamanite ward in Provo, and he says, "You're my first counselor." So he called me as the first counselor in the married student ward. Bishop Frank Jones, he's a Seneca Indian, and he called me as his first counselor. So one thing after another prepared me for the next thing that the Lord needed me to do. And of course, later on, I became the bishop of that ward that I started attending after my mission. And along comes children, beautiful wife, 6 kids, 23 grandkids. My goodness, what can you say about that except joy, happiness? Because they are my link to the Lord in me getting to heaven and praying that and working with my kids and my grandkids and my great grandkids to come and be with me and my wife in the celestial kingdom. What can you say about that except pure joy and happiness? I'm happy. And when you're happy, it doesn't matter what happens to you, your faith is strong in the church, and that's what made me the way I am today.
Very good.
Thank you so much, Sister Connell and Brother Padeken, for joining us today. We appreciate all of the thoughts you've shared, all the experiences you shared. This was just a great lesson and definitely the most in-depth discussion I've ever had about the mission to the Lamanites. So thank you for all of the preparation and thoughts you brought today. We invite everybody to join us again next week by watching us on the Gathering of Tribes YouTube channel or by listening on your favorite audio podcast platform. To learn more about the mission of Gathering of Tribes and upcoming events, you can visit our website at www.gatheringoftribes.org. If you like this podcast, we would love for you to take a moment and write a review. Positive reviews not only uplift us, but they also help others find our podcast. Thank you for joining. May your path be peaceful and enlightening this week.